Simplify your life. Living off the grid is largely about simplifying your life or shedding the unimportant. You are to decide what is important to you. To me, the unimportant are property, habits, and energies that you are not immediately employing for the well-being of yourself and loved ones. So let's define these. Property can be material and immaterial. Material property are the things you own and are stored somewhere. They take space, be light or heavy. Immaterial property can be in digital form stored in a hard drive like documents or photographs. Habits are actions that take time from your day. They may be routine, random, or seldomly done. For example, smoking, exercising, and going to a place of worship are habits. Energies are available means to energize something. Money is a type of symbolic energy. In money, we must agree that it has the power to generate voluntary labor and be accepted in exchange for a finished product, like a chair. Energy is also what we accept as the conventional types: electrical, pressure, chemical, mechanical, etc. For example, we may store electrical energy in batteries or chemical energy in tanks to have them ready at a point of dispensing, like an electrical socket or a spigot. Simplifying your life entails discarding those things, habits, and energies that are not being actively used for good. It is up to you to define what actively using means so you can better determine what things in your life qualify as unimportant. To me, unimportant things are those that are collecting dust in a closet, sitting in page storage, under a pile of other things, forgotten and out of sight, out of easy reach, with no practical or emotional use, etc. There are many other qualifiers for unimportant to list here, but you should get the point. Unimportant habits may be time-wasting habits, harmful or unhealthy habits, habits that are depriving others of your attention, or habits depriving you of needs and wants, etc. By wants I mean the things you don't need to live, but they are legitimate and reasonable goals that allow for greater happiness. Shedding the habit of using excessive energy is a big part of living off the grid. You should share excess energy away from you if you cannot use it efficiently and productively. That excess energy should be offered so that others may use it, or it should not be produced in the first place. For example, if you plan to grow food, only produce that which you can consume or share. Any excess may cause waste. Also, if a wealthy individual lives on 10 acres of land, while at the same time there is a severe homelessness crisis in that community, that individual has stored excess energy in the form of space. Unless the land is being actively used for living, food production, or other, it is being wasted. In cases of land use, many others may benefit greatly if landowners were to parcel and donate most of their land, for example to homeless individuals willing to move in. Likewise, having too much electrical charge stored in your solar battery is an example of a waste or overshoot. Overshoot indicates that you went well over your needs, in this case, on electrical production and storage. Again, in this case, you should direct some of the resources spent on the system elsewhere as needed. Simply put, simplifying is attempting to do just enough good, with just enough resources. I understand this is an idea, a goal, a concept that may never be perfectly achieved. But it is worth trying, and to constantly attempt to find that balance. And, as long as you are in the ballpark, you should be proud and satisfied with your efforts. Some of us may be more demanding of ourselves and push efficiency closer to optimal, but these limits and goals are lines to be drawn on an individual basis. I believe that doing more with less promotes personal peace because it brings more organization to your mind. You can declutter to the point that mind clarity can enable deeper, accurate, and sound decisions, which will surely yield more productive and advantageous results. Some may call this consistent good decision-making or wisdom. This may bring peace through your continued just and reasonable judgments. As a result of your reliable and consistent positive outcomes, your peers may be attracted to your methods and ask for your help. Just remember to keep yourself modest and efficient, and resist any influx of excess energy in the form of personal power. Again, today's society is set up to give excess power to those that make sound decisions, and that excess begins to contradict the off-grid, sustainable lifestyle. How does living off-grid promote world peace? The other type of peace in the context of living off the grid is world peace. World peace is the broad term I use for peace external to your person. It begins with peace with the people in your immediate space or room. Peace is the absence of violence, forced control, abuse, or coercion. Peace is the allowance of life, health, and self-determination for others that live around you and far from you. The logic is simple. Do unto others as you wish them to do unto you. So, world peace is the extension of this concept to all other persons and animals. The right to exist, live, and carry a healthy, dignified, and self-ruled life should apply to you and others in the same manner. If these were respected, in all instances, I believe war and conflict would not exist. The living off-grid, efficient and just lifestyle instigates us to live in peace, if only so that we too can live in peace and carry our autonomy. You may ask, what is the ultimate source of peace? Who or what brings it about? And who or what enforces it? I believe that historical, scientific, religious, and moral teachings teach us the importance of an orderly and peaceful community. And the drive to self-preservation should be the main driver to be peaceful with others. So, I believe we must be the source and enforcement of peace. If we require it, and agree to uphold it no matter the situation, then it will remain the norm in most instances. I understand nature is full of conflict and seeming chaos. But although other animals generally engage in killing and conflict because of necessity, I believe historically, human violence and conflicts have never occurred out of necessity. Historically, we have used aggression as the ultimate enforcer. And I believe that arrogance, ignorance, greed, territorialism, racism, and more best describe the reasonings of our past and present conflicts. I believe nationalism, religious views, and racism, especially, have fueled our most recent and deadly conflicts. For example, World War II was largely fought over territory, resources, and fossil fuels. But I believe nationalism, racism, and religion were the real driving force. For example, Germany and Japan looked to expand into territories and resources controlled by other expansionist powers. This triggered the violent response of those other powers, which were engaging in colonialism long before them. I believe the ongoing massacre in Gaza has been fueled by racism and religion. Other past violent conflicts in Indochina, the Middle East, Africa, and much of the political crisis in Central and South America have been largely caused over fossil fuel resources or political views. Although racism and political and religious differences are problems we must address outside of the context of the off-grid lifestyle, living off the grid allows you to contribute to end the apparent need for wars over resources. Oppose conflict over fossil fuel resources. The living off-the-grid lifestyle I advocate here largely calls for 1. Transitioning to an extremely reduced use of energy and resources first, then 2. Transition into using alternative and renewable sources of energy. These two core steps reduce the demand on fossil fuel energy and resources significantly. Yes, I understand that even the leading alternative energy technologies require the use of some fossil fuels for their manufacture and transportation. But, even when accounting for these, if this strategy would succeed, the demand on fossil fuels would be only a fraction of what it is today. A growing body of studies have demonstrated this point, that the widespread manufacture and use of alternative energy technologies would, in fact, dramatically lower demand for fossil fuels. Accepting this, and lowering the worldwide demand for fossil fuels, conflicts over fossil fuel sources and extraction would, in theory, also significantly lower. I say in theory, because this argument is yet to be fully tested. I believe we are now in the rapid transition to alternative energy, and it remains to be seen if wars over oil turn into wars over lithium, cobalt, or manganese. I wholly believe it would be more peaceful under a renewable energy paradigm, but as ignorance and other abhorrent behaviors may increase with other factors, as many trends seem to show, that future is anyone's guess. There is little we can predict about the future nature of conflicts, gauging by recent developments around the world. And there is a lot to be wished for about the future human behavior over minerals and the remaining dwindling fossil fuel resources. Hopefully, there will be less than the current amount and severity of our conflicts soon. And, hopefully our approach to green energy resources is more mature than the take it by any means necessary approach of our past. But seemingly, we are already chafing at the edges, noticeable on the recent Sino-American-Taiwanese tensions which surrounded the high-tech chip industry. And, it can be seen that major world powers are swooping in into areas to secure resources for alternative energy technologies fast. Whether within their national territories or abroad, nations are acquiring and leasing lands for mining at a fast rate. With major industries moving clearly into electrification, like the automotive industry and utility energy. In tandem, countries and major corporations are moving fast to 1. Secure sources of minerals for the many components of alternative energies, and 2. Secure the technological and supply edge to secure an advantageous position in those industries. For example, solar panels require aluminum, silver, silica, arsenic, gallium, germanium, cobalt, and indium, among others. Wind turbines require aluminum and rare earth elements for powerful magnets. And batteries, which use cobalt, graphite, lithium, and manganese. The demand for these and other minerals and metals has and will continue to increase as we move forward with these leading alternative energy technologies in several industries. As I estimate, from my humble individual viewpoint, we are moving so fast into these alternative energies because we may be trying to replace our current energy demand with green energy sources and technology. As said, I believe this is the wrong approach. If we don't simplify our energy consumption, lower it, then we may just replace our conflicts over fossil fuels with our conflicts over green resources. The demand must lower to make the whole system sustainable. Our resolve to remain in peace in our neighborhood and in the world should not be based on how much resources we think we need. Of course, peace should be accepted as a stand-alone requirement and a non-negotiable state, and as a human right, which naturally follows from the needs of our other human rights. Life, expression, happiness, self-determination, choice, etc. Having stated this, our lessened dependence on all types of resources, together with our higher level of environmental and human consciousness, we should finally renounce our most violent and destructive tendencies. These abhorrent tendencies to conquer, expand, and control by force will perhaps soon be replaced by increased voluntary trade and amicable agreements, which are enforced not by force but by class action. Meaning, by nonviolent consequences decided upon by the collection of other players or nations. How does living off the grid promote freedom? Freedom has many definitions. In the living off-grid context, freedom can be described as being free from high costs, debt, forcible lifestyles, unreasonable taxation, etc. There are other, more traditional, definitions of freedom that are essential to being able to live off the grid, and that are also benefits of such lifestyle. In other words, some freedoms are required so that you can live off-grid, while other freedoms are the result of this lifestyle. These required freedoms must be extended to you by your neighbor, community, government, etc., as human and civil rights. In turn, you must extend these required freedoms to your neighbors as well, and even your animals. Here, I will discuss the required freedoms of choice, expression, and the pursuit of happiness. Then, I will delve into the benefits of living off the grid: financial, time, mobility freedom, and freedom from employment. Freedom of choice. You must have, keep, and demand freedom to choose if you are free and live in a truly free society. Choose how to do basic things like dress, behave, speak, etc. No one should demand of you how to behave, as long as it is not harmful to others. Furthermore, you should not be forced to make choices. Free people should be able not to choose from certain choices. If you are required to make a choice, you are not truly free. For example, choose to identify a certain way, religious or not, Catholic or Protestant, Democrat or Republican. If you accept to make a choice, then two or more viable and distinct choices should be provided to you. Oftentimes, in our society, we are coerced into non-choices, or a choice between a cherry-picked option and another that will surely ruin you, making your predicament disadvantageous in multiple ways. For example, the choice between getting a set of vaccines and not being able to attend public school. I am not an anti-vaccine person, but a choice should give you viable options. To go back to your freedom to choose, the fact that you are required to make choices suggests a control-controller situation. That goes against freedom of choice, does it not? In fact, in a totally free environment, you select the choices to make the selection from. But this is clearly not the world most of us live in. For example, when selecting housing, most working adults have no choice but to pay for it. Either pay or choose homelessness. Other choices are just not viable, like temporary shelters or camping out indefinitely. These are not viable choices because not many like the prospect of being homeless and suffer the many life-threatening consequences of it. Also, you are not choosing the candidates that run for office in practice, do you? Here in the U.S., political candidates often seem to be rolled out by the rich and powerful for us to vote for. Other non-choices in our grid-tied lives include buying food, working for an income, choosing where to live, choosing what to do for a living. These, and more, are often choices given to us with limited options, or even a single option. For example, if medical school is extraordinarily expensive in your state or nation, going to medical school is not a choice for the 99% of prospect students with little to no income. Effectively, this is not a real choice for the poor, is it? Since it is practically and expectedly extremely unlikely to occur. Still, many yelled the opportunity and choice is there for everyone. Living off the grid grounds you to this reality, and its concepts encourage you to fight for your freedom of choice and fight against the imposing of non-choices. For example, in most instances you have the choice to disconnect from the grid, but the alternative may be so dire and undesired that most of us don't even consider it. For example, if you live in a rented apartment and with a family, disconnecting from the grid may be forbidden by contract, or even local ordinances, or if you have children, in some locales. In such a case, you're not given a viable choice. Although, some valiantly determined individuals may still make the choice to disconnect and fight an uphill battle in the courts and win, most people won't take such risk because the way the system is set up. This is another big reason for writing this book, to help you develop the methods that would make disconnection a viable choice. For example, I recommend that before plans for disconnection from the grid take place, you must ensure that the system will not fight your decision with tooth and nail at every step of your journey. In other words, make sure you have a reasonable shot at succeeding in your disconnection plans under the ordinances and social environment you live in. If it is exceedingly difficult to make such a decision, then it may be best to vote with your feet and move to a more friendly environment, or simply remain connected and not use those services. Consider that, if moving is a better option, you may not have to move too far and change your entire life. Just further from the areas of high control, or perhaps just another apartment or home with less stipulations on their contract or covenant. Again, you may make strategic and creative choices that yield the same or similar results. Like, if you are not allowed to disconnect from electric service, just keep the connection and turn off your main breaker. This should yield similar results, perhaps with a small connection monthly fee. Remember, as a human right you have the fundamental freedom of choice, and you cannot be made to pay for anything. Unless the authority coercing you to pay is willing to pay for you, you cannot be forced to purchase any service, especially from any one specific provider. This is surely unconstitutional in the U.S., and to my knowledge, is yet to be tested in the high courts. In your plans on how to live off the grid, you will have to find additional choices for the services provided by the grid, oftentimes on your own. Because the grid wants you to remain in your place, other choices may be suppressed or made difficult to find. As we've discussed, there are several choices for water, electrical, and communication services. As examples, you may catch, pump, or channel water to your filtering system, you may generate electricity from the sun or wind, and you may use radio and computer equipment to communicate freely. These are just some of the many other choices for grid services. But the attempts by your government to control all things and people into a mold they've created, hide, and make alternative choices are often undesirable. But, as an off-gridder, you must break through the artificial barriers placed by your governments and the middle people, and valiantly behold the possibilities.